Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you are in the world. December 26, 2020. My name is Hans Nordsiek, also known as Storyteller. Welcome at the next episode of Stearman Tales. Today we talk about airspeed, indicator and altimeter, and we have a very special guest which I will introduce a little bit later. He's came all the way from America and he's an expert on airplanes, on big Boeings and also on general aviation, Stearman's, T6s, etc. So today it is about airspeed and indicator and the altimeter. Question 1. This is an airplane, this is a 1943 Boeing Stearman biplane, built in the 1943 to train US, Canadian and Allied pilots, airmen, military airmen that fought at that time for our today's freedom. And today this airplane is in the Netherlands at the airport called Breda International Airport, and it is in the Flying Museum. Excuse me. So she's in a modern livery. At that time, in the 1940s, she was in a military livery. So airspeed, altimeter. Airspeed. Why do you want to know what your speed is? Yeah, first question. Why is it important to know what your speed is in an airplane? Because if I'm on my pedal bike, I don't care. I just fly and with this airplane, okay, I fly and it doesn't matter how fast we go. Isn't it with these old vintage biplanes, the slower you go, the better it is because the more fun you have. You stay up in the air longer. Well, there is a good reason why we want to know our airspeed. Number 1, the explanation, and then we go here. This is the important part of an airspeed indicator and an altimeter. Airspeed, or if you fly, air goes in here, and the faster you fly, the more air goes in here. It's like on your bike, and you open your mouth, the faster you go, the more air you get in. Same here. The air pressure goes towards the airspeed indicator in the cockpit, and that is translated into the deflection of a needle. So the more air goes in here, the more pressure, the higher, the faster you fly, the more deflection of the airspeed indicator you have. Well, why do we want to know the airspeed? Well, there are several reasons. Number 1 is performance. You want to know how fast you go, because if you fly slow, you have a lot of headwind, it will take longer before you are at your destination. If you fly fast, tailwind, you will have a higher speed on the ground. So for your performance to predict when you will be at your destination, you need to know your airspeed. There's another reason why you need to know your airspeed, because there's a minimum airspeed for an airplane below which it cannot fly, and there's a maximum airspeed you can fly. You're allowed to fly. Above that, you have the chance of getting structural damage to the airplane. So the minimum airspeed, stay away from that, and the maximum airspeed, stay away from that. So these are the primary reasons why we want to know our speed, our airspeed. Now, come we go to the cockpit and we show you the airspeed indicator. So, well, here is the airspeed indicator. Now this is the needle, and look at the outer scale, that is in miles per hour. There's also an inner scale that is in knots, nautical miles per hour. Now we're at the ground, it is at 0. If we start to roll on the runway, we start to go flying, we see the needle going up to 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 miles per hour or even higher. And you see the minimum airspeed of this airplane to stay in the air is around 50. That's the minimum. So when you fly, stay above 50 miles per hour. And then you see here a red line. That's the maximum airspeed. That's 186 miles per hour. That's a lot of airspeed. Here, the normal range you fly when you cruise along is around 100 miles per hour. And now this airplane it's a flying drag, a lot of parts hanging in the breeze, so it's almost impossible to go that fast. So that's the reason why we have an airspeed indicator. Now let's see, here's another one. There's an altimeter. What can we do with that? Well, let me get out of the cockpit and introduce to you our very special guest from America. 1 minute. Here is my good friend Sean. Sean, introduce yourself, please.
My friends, my name is Sean Hokuff, and I'm a major airline pilot from the United States. And I'm actually here in Amsterdam on one of the normal trips that I fly here on a layover. So I'm here to visit my friend Hans, and he's brought me to his home airport today to show me his airplane in the museum that he flies out of. And so he asked me to contribute to this video a little bit today. So hope to teach you a little bit more about another instrument in the cockpit, and that's the altimeter. So I'll go ahead and climb in the airplane too. So Hans was explaining the airspeed indicator here, and right below that we have the altimeter.
Well, let me autofocus on this here.
Okay, and
yes, here we go. Yeah.
So, a lot of people want to know how instruments in the cockpit work, and a real simple way to explain both of these instruments and a couple other ones in here are that they're simply pressure gauges. So an airspeed indicator, just like an altimeter, is simply a pressure gauge. They're just showing you pressure that's coming in a tube and sending it to that gauge. So the airspeed indicator is indicating what we call dynamic pressure or moving pressure. That is how fast air is being rammed into that tube out on the wing. The altimeter is just measuring static pressure. And another way to think of static pressure is just non-moving air pressure. So as we go higher in the air, there's less air stacked on top of the air that there is down here on the surface of the earth, so the pressure drops. And that's all that the altimeter is registering, is it's showing what the pressure of the static non-moving outside air is. And as we climb, that pressure drops, and the air pressure instrument, the altimeter, just shows us that drop in pressure, and we translate it into numbers on the instrument, and that tells us what our altitude is. So probably the two most important air instruments in the airplane are the airspeed indicator and the altimeter. And again, they're just registering two different kinds of pressure that are important to us as pilots, so that we know what the airplane is doing. That is how fast it's going, and then how high we are, because we want to know what altitude we're flying at, so that we're at the altitude that we plan to fly at, and that's so that we can avoid other airplanes that may be at different altitudes. And then the airplane has to come back down and land at some point, so we want to know how close we are to our landing elevation back on the ground. And so then that gives us an indication of that. So that's a rundown of the airspeed indicator. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk about some of the other instruments another time.
Yeah, and one question, Sean. Yeah. How do you measure the static air pressure? How do you measure that?
So there's another opening on the airplane. Sometimes it's near the pitot tube where the moving pressure comes in for the airspeed indicator. Sometimes it's somewhere else on the airplane, like on the side of the fuselage, or somewhere where it's not directly facing into the air, and that's how we measure the static pressure.
Okay, very good. One last question before we say everybody happy holidays. What do you personally love about being in an airplane?
What I like like about being in an airplane is the perspective. Okay, it's very easy for us to get caught up in what's going on in our little part of the world, our little area, especially with what's going on in the world right now. And when I get up in an airplane, whether that be a Boeing 767 or a Stearman, it gives me a totally different perspective on life and Earth. I'm able to look down, and things are smaller. I can see more of the world that we live in at one time, and so it just changes your perspective. So I would say that's something that I really enjoy about flying.
Sean, thank you so much for showing us in your world of flying and your enthusiasm and the explanation of the altimeter. Happy holidays to all the viewers. Thank you so much. Talk to you next time. This was Sean and Hans. We'll be back.